Welcome to Trillium's Plain Talk. I'm Steve Laska, managing partner at Trillium Wealth, and I'm here with my partner, as usual, Matt Gomoll. Matt, last time we talked about Iran, and this time we're going to talk about Iran. So there's obviously still a lot to be talked about there. So where do we start today?
Yeah, so I think the big story is, so we're about 2 weeks into the war, and just the economic impacts, right? The oil markets, damage done by the Straits of Hormuz being disrupted is the big story. Trying to understand what that does to financial markets, inflation, all that stuff. And frankly, it can have an impact on the war as the U.S. administration feels pressure, economic pressure, even though militarily, everything is going to plan. Economic pressure plays a role in our will to continue the fight. So that's kind of the topic of the day.
Yeah, and it's important for, our viewers and listeners to know that much of the energy markets are predicated on literally prediction. Like what is this going to be 3 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now? And it's not like the war broke out and all of a sudden there was no oil supply anywhere. Nobody had any stored anywhere, right? So it's predictive, and it's, what the markets are starting to look at is how long does it last? What does it mean? And it will be interesting because it's, you and I talked a little bit before this. There is no ambiguity. The Iranian firepower is ridiculously depleted right now. However, it doesn't take a lot of disruption. I mean, the people driving oil tankers are not military people. And the fear of being hit is enough. And it's not, there is, for the foreseeable future, it doesn't take a lot to launch a rocket or two. It takes a lot to launch massive attacks, but it's a very tight area, and it's really civilians trying to travel through there. And so for now, the market's predicting this is a problem. I don't know, and maybe you can give us what some of your insights are on, like, if tomorrow, because, you and I are well aware that sometimes people just declare victory, whether both sides declare victory, right? Like, the U.S. turns around and goes, yep, we won. And the Iranians go, see, they left, we won. What are your insights on what it would take for, like, what would the messaging be, and what would it take for the Straits of Hormuz to be safe, aside from the military just going in there, or various countries' militaries going in there and doing escorts?
Yeah, so this is what we call asymmetric warfare, right? So like symmetrical is two conventional militaries fighting head to head, and one gets an advantage. That was us in the Gulf War, us against Iraq, invading Kuwait. Two armies going head to head. We won handedly. This is asymmetric. They are not trying to fight us that way. So instead, they're using drones, missiles, rockets to target the things that they can, which is shipping, which is civilian populations in and around the Gulf states, obviously targeting Israel with long-range missiles. And they're trying to play a different game, right? They haven't even shot down any of our aircraft. So we have complete control over the skies because their air defense is ineffective. We're not on the ground, so their army's ineffective against us. But they're trying to use whatever means they have to their advantage. That's what we're seeing right now. As far as how does this keep playing out? Well, they don't need that many, right? Like we've degraded their launch capability, but you don't have to have that many drones to target the ships. This is where we get into realizing that geography actually matters. Like we're a giant country that's super far away from anybody we ever fight. So geography is kind of an afterthought for most Americans. But over there, you can picture this is the Straits of Hormuz is 2 miles wide. It's like across a river from somebody, and they're shooting rockets as you're trying to cruise a boat through it. So the problem is it's hard to stop everything. And as long as something gets through, that's the problem. Like the crews, the companies don't want to take the risk of, losing crew, losing a ship that's really, really expensive and hard to replace, losing the cargo. All those things combine into why nobody's taking the risk to go through that. how it kind of gets unstuck. You've already, like, we've seen whoever is representing the Iranian government recently say, we'll let anybody's ships except for the US and Israel go through the straits. That didn't unstick the problem, right? First of all, the US and Israel has hardly any ships going through there, so it's not even like an issue. But that still didn't unfreeze all those ships that are stuck in the Arabian Gulf to start moving, right? They don't trust that whoever's saying that in Tehran, telling them, hey, you can go, they don't believe it. And so there needs to be confidence that, number one, like, they're not going to get shot at, or number two, like, they're going to be protected and defended. And from the Navy standpoint, it's a really hard problem. Like I said, it's a super narrow area that things can come at you real quick and you have seconds to react. And obviously the US ships have systems to do that, but we'd have to be protecting a long convoy of ships. And it's a hard problem.
Do you know offhand, like, how much of our energy comes through there? I mean, I know, like, so it's a weird thing. People talk about being energy independent. It's like, well, we can be, but there's crude, there's West Texas Intermediate crude, right? And there's different things that are used for different things, and it's about refining and stuff. So even though we could just live on our own energy, I know we still do import. How much comes from there?
Hardly any, right? So we are not dependent on the oil from the Middle East. However, oil is a global market, right? So this is like, and this is what a concept that we all got to understand. It's not just that we have enough oil and we're going to be good. It's that the demand for oil gets, if the demand stays the same and there's less supply, because 20% of the global oil supply comes through the Straits of Hormuz. If we all of a sudden have 20% less supply, well, other people in other areas are going to bid up the price of oil. They're going to be like, oh, we were getting our oil from the Middle East through the Straits of Hormuz over to Asia. That's not coming anymore. We want to buy some of what you are using in the US. So our oil prices go up, right? And unless, you say there's zero oil exports and you do a self-contained, that, we're not going to do that. But it's a ripple effect of the oil that was supposed to go somewhere else through the Straits of Hormuz is no longer going there. Those people still want to buy it, and they're going to be willing to pay more money. So the price of all oil barrels goes up generally, right? And there are these different indexes of West Texas Intermediary, Brent, and other things. But it's just generally, the price of oil in general goes up because there's less of it available and the same amount of demand as there was 3 weeks ago.
So it's something I've espoused for a long time. And I've tried, this is actually just validating the things I've tried to teach people, is when they're like, well, if we make the oil here, our gas prices will be low. I'm like, not really. Like, gas prices historically were low in Venezuela because Venezuelan government subsidized gas prices there because they actually own the oil fields. And at the end of the day, Exxon is not so patriotic that they go, oh, that stuff's going on in Iran. Don't worry about it, guys. We'll still sell ourselves stuff at $60 a barrel to you guys, right? I will tell you something, Matt, and I'm interested in your reaction to this. I don't think people are going to like necessarily how I couch and say this, but you were describing them kind of hitting boats. Oddly enough, I think it's a lesson learned from. We can almost look at Vietnam, and I'll tell you why. Like, I was a young private at basic training in the early '80s, and you still had a lot of Vietnam era, NCOs at the time, and one big guy, a big drill sergeant, made the comment that Vietnam was like, you're playing a basketball game, you look up at the scoreboard, it's 72-0 in favor of you, the buzzer goes off, and they say you lost. That's a little bit, I think it is analogous to this, right? It's guerrilla warfare is what you just described earlier. It's like, they can just be a nuisance. That's what happened in Vietnam. Like, we didn't lose any battles in Vietnam. We just trounced everybody all the time. And consequently, in the grand scheme of things, over a decade, we didn't really even lose that many people. I mean, it's horrific, but 50,000 compared to millions in the other, world wars. This kind of reminds me of how long they can just kind of peck at stuff unless, and that's where I said before, like, maybe there just comes a time where the US at some point, and even the other Middle Eastern countries go, declare victory and move on. And to me, there's some validity to that, because we talked a little bit about, apparently we talked a little bit about regime change last time. At the end of the day, like there's already been people protesting there for a long time. It's not like if we left and all the damage we've already done, that this is easy for them to just reconstitute and do things the way they did it a month ago. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah. So what you're kind of hitting on there is something I teach in military history classes in my Army Reserve job. Clausewitz was a 1800s military historian and writer, and he made the statements about war being an extension of politics. Right, it is not just a separate thing. It is politics by other means, an extension of it, of trying to achieve political objectives, and that war is inherently about bending the will of your adversary to your will. That's where we get into trouble. When our will can be bent through economic means or restrictions we place on ourselves. So, for example, you make the point of like, they don't need to, it's not that Iran is sealing the straits and they're patrolling it with their boats and they're mining it and they're physically controlling it. They're disrupting it. They're shooting some stuff and that is going to degrade. But when we're only hitting it from the air and we don't go take a foothold of basically like you could control the Iranian coastline and be like, okay, well, there's nobody here to shoot because we own the land. But that's politically hard, right? We don't, there's after our experiences in Afghanistan and Iraq for 20 years, there's a big hesitance to use the military that way. That looks like we're getting stuck and bogged down in another forever war. So politically, really, really hard to do, even though militarily, yeah, we could send in the Marines and we could control Karg Island and we can control this strip of land and we could guarantee, nothing's getting shot at boats. That's hard to do politically, right? So that's that asymmetry, like they're taking advantage of a weakness they see in our will and our politics and what we're, the constraints we feel to say, well, we can do this. Like we can, get a drone here, shoot it there, and no more boats will go through because they're afraid. So yeah, that's a big problem that we need to figure out how to manage.
Yeah, consequently, I think you either have to declare victory in the next 30 days and say we won without taking ground, or you just have to overcome the politics. And it's tougher now because you got midterm elections coming up and like putting boots on the ground, while it might be the right geopolitical answer, the domestically, politically, it's suicide for the GOP to pull that trigger. At least I think so. I think if they turn around and put boots on the ground, they just, they lose the House and the Senate like overwhelmingly, almost right away.
Right. The Venezuela model of quick strike in and out. Look at this fantastic victory we achieved, military success. It's kind of like, oh, can we do that again in Iran? Well, yes and no. Like the first 2 or 3 days of strikes were unbelievably overwhelming and decapitating of them. But without boots on the ground, does it get the same effect, right? This is a huge country. Our objective is much, much bigger than take one guy out of power like Venezuela was. So with all those problems, like what can you achieve without getting more committed? I look at it from, the big picture. I would call this strategic disarmament, and it's successful. Did we absolutely reduce their missile capability, their nuclear capability, their ability to project power through proxies by this operation? Absolutely. Is the next whoever takes charge, whether it's the same somebody from the Islamic regime or somebody outside it, whoever takes power isn't going to be able to use those levers of Iranian power and influence the same way that they were used a month ago. However, if we allow them to control this and be viewed as, hey, we can actually control the straits just through disruption, that's a blow to us politically. And that, more so than the bigger picture than whatever happens in the midterm election here, this is like, what power does the U.S. have if this, if this regime that they absolutely dominated militarily put them in an economic chokehold over this one tiny piece of land, or land in the straits. So that's a big problem, and I don't think anybody in the military or government wants to set the precedent that we give them the win on this one. But at the same time, how much economic cost are we willing to bear? And it's going to show up in inflation in other areas, not just high gas prices. So it's a problem of how we address this, and have it be both success for our strategic goals, but not a loss for allowing them to dictate the terms of our exit.
On some cases, it's not rocket science. I mean, Colin Powell, his doctrine that he wrote was go in with literally overwhelming force. Just go in with as much as you can. And he did not just mean Air and Navy when he wrote that, right? It was like, go in there, take it fast, and move on from there. When I look at like disruption and things that happen in the economy, again, none of us want to admit this, but the Twin Towers attacks by Osama bin Laden, a couple thousand people died, but the U.S. has now spent trillions of dollars on a war on terror. It changed our lives on going through airports. It changed our lives on how we actually live life and do those things. I look at why I want like once you make the decision, why I want them to go in with overwhelming force is, you sent me an article where a professor of military science gets shot by an Islamic extremist. We're sitting here right now while two political parties are having a slap fight over funding Homeland Security. It's absurd, right? I mean, it's absurd that Homeland isn't funded when these kind of things can start to happen here. And I fear that a little bit, because you talk about disrupting the economy. That doesn't take a lot, man. I mean, the guy did it, and it was a big thing, but some kind of strategic uprisings at various places around the country will put a damper on that as well. And I do fear that could bleed over if they don't handle this pretty quickly.
Yeah, our threshold as Americans, for that economic cost and what we're willing to bear is just different. And like, we won't be ruined if gas stays at $100 a barrel, but we won't be happy about it. Right. Other countries will actually. So here's the thing: like oil markets, big picture, Americans can afford $100 a barrel oil. We can afford, if our gas costs $3.50 to $4 a gallon, it's not going to be fun. Like, people will have less money in their bank account at the end of the month, right? So their savings goes down, their quality of life goes down. They might cut back on a little bit of stuff. Inflation shows up in other areas. If that's some other country importing oil at 100, they might have businesses just shut down. Like, they can't, that is above their cost of their input cost for operating their business or their factory. And so they just shut down. And now that output is gone from the global market, and so on, right? So this is, it can have these second and third order effects that, while we're still okay, like, yeah, I don't like $4 gallon gas, but it's going to be okay. And we've been there before, and we'll get through it. But it starts to ripple across the global economy in a way that is not sustainable, and that's a problem. So there are right now, so like some of the stats I would have: Brent crude started the year at 61, and today it's 107. That's a big increase, right? Big increase. But we're in the process of trying to mitigate it, right? So 20 million barrels a day flow through the Straits of Hormuz prior to the war. So we have like a 20 million barrel shortage a day. That can be made up to like ease the strain. Some of the things that are working on easing the strain, International Energy Agency just talked about releasing 400 million barrels from different emergency reserves around the world. That can help. Might not last forever though, but it can help in the interim. You've got the Saudi Arabia has an east-west pipeline. So back in the 80s, they saw the problem of the Straits of Hormuz and said, we're just going to build, even though we're right here and our boats can get on and go, right out to the Indian Ocean, we're going to build a pipeline all the way to the Red Sea because we're scared of Iran, right? Which goes to show like the ridiculousness of allowing Iran for decades to like be this threat on this choke point that both Saudi Arabia and the UAE both built pipelines to avoid them. So 5 million barrels a day can go through Saudi Arabia's pipeline, 1.5 million through the UAE pipeline, which just bypasses the Straits of Hormuz, kicks it out to Indian Ocean. Then you have easing sanctions against Russia, right? We've made it, because of the Ukrainian war, we've made it very hard for Russia to sell its oil internationally. And if we give them a reprieve, more Russian oil hits the market, which can help, fill the missing supply and then increase production in other areas, right? Like the US can ramp up production. It doesn't happen with a flick of a switch, but we can, output more barrels a day. Venezuela, which had really low production, we could, that could increase. Other places can outside of the Middle East, because obviously we're going to shut down production in a place like Iraq or Kuwait because they got no outlet. But these different kind of shock absorbers can help mitigate the loss that's not coming through the Straits of Hormuz, but not really fully replace it, which gets into prices still staying elevated until demand is destroyed, right? It's called demand destruction of, well, prices won't go down until people stop using this much oil.
So to validate what you said on the price and what the real pain points are, in 2008, oil was over $140 a barrel. I swear most people don't even remember it. 18 years ago, if you ask people, like they'd say right now, they think oil's the highest it's ever been. Heck, if you apply like low factored inflation on it, 140 in 2008 would be like if it was like 200 or 210 right now, right? It's just, and of course, there was a day when it was minus 30 a barrel in the last couple of years, I think, or so.
Yep. COVID, yeah.
Yeah. So demand's certainly a problem. I think it, by the way, when we talk about things like national security, and oil is used in so many things, it's not just gas. It's used in a lot of things out there that we need and use every day. But it does continue to press the button on alternative energy is not a bad thing, right? It's also like if we get over that argument too, that it's this or that and not a combination of both, maybe something like this will lead to that. What else do you want to talk about?
Yeah, where I think it's the headline of straits are closed, oil is X price. That's what most people are going to be getting and consuming as it's in your face for the last 2 weeks, and it's going to be in your face for another 2 weeks at least. Starting to think of beyond that, what does this actually mean? That's where I think it's useful to say, all right, well, what if oil is $100 a barrel for the next 6 months? What does that do? Are we in a recession? No, probably not. Right? Here in the U.S., it'll shave a little bit off the GDP because it's like everybody's cost of living goes up a little bit. Inflation will stay high. The Fed won't cut rates, right? We expected coming into this year, most people were saying, hey, that like we think they're going to do 1 or 2 quarter point cuts this year. They might have none. If inflation stays high, 326, are we talking a rate hike? I don't think so, but maybe. So these problems are, it's like, yeah, that one thing, that one choke point of what's causing disruption is rippling through a bunch of other things. And so that's kind of a problem. More broadly, beyond that, we get into, well, where do U.S. election go? Where the fact of, if this is a problem politically in November, do the House and the Senate flip? If they flip, what does that mean for what our foreign policy is going forward, right? Because now Congress is probably going to be a little more aggressive in asserting control over foreign policy. It kind of gets into the big picture of what does this do for our other adversaries? Russia's going to get a short-term boost. They're going to have more money if we allow their oil on the market than what they were selling it as a discount kind of on the black market. So what does that do to prolonging the Ukrainian war? What does China do? I think China looks at this and says, we are very, China's very exposed to oil prices. So they just need even more energy that's renewable and nuclear. So they're just going to like build even more of that stuff so that this kind of thing doesn't disrupt them. Ultimately, I don't think, there's a positive outcome to all this where we are able to assert control over a major choke point. And that leads to, the US is irreplaceable on the world stage for providing security and freedom of navigation. And the US dollar is secure in its position as the petrodollar and all those things. Like that is a possible outcome here. As well as, I don't want to see a couple years down the road people saying, gosh, you remember when, the U.S. messed around in Iran and it made a mess for global oil markets for a few years, and we're annoyed by that, and we're going to find other, sources of trade and other places to store dollars rather than the U.S. dollar. We're going to, this could keep gold, like the uncertainty around financial markets and stable assets can put more people in gold and more central banks. So it's like there's a lot of things that can come out of what is a very small place on the world.
So I want to do some simple math for our clients, because the headline during these times is always about gas and gas prices. And certainly gas prices affect a lot of things, but you'll hear politicians like, both ways. Like right now, like we got gas so cheap, or, gas is going to go up. So here's a simple math for people if they're worried about gas prices being $1 a gallon more, which is a lot. And that's what people look, a whole dollar a gallon. If you drive 10,000 miles a year and your car gets 25 miles to the gallon, which is a fair number, most people probably get better than that, you're affecting your monthly budget by $33. That's what it really is. And I think a lot of people out there think if gas prices go up $1 a gallon, they're spending $5,000 a year more. It's literally, if you're driving 10,000 miles, it's about $33 a month, right? So people should keep that in perspective. And I think I want our clients to realize that, like, ask questions instead of just reading the headlines and getting nervous about them. Because more than ever, I said it last time, the news doesn't know how to cover the news anymore. And more than ever, like people talk about clicks and how do I get attention on stuff. And if you just go on the internet or turn on the lead into the news and the teaser app, but before the commercial, they're designed to get you to stay there. And if it's simple, like, it's not that, it's only $33 a month off your budget, nobody's going to click on that, and nobody's going to stay after the commercial. So I'd warn our clients in times like this. It doesn't take a lot, by the way, for this to all kind of fall back in place. Because like I said, the futures traders, there's people on each side of the trade. So there'll be some people losing money on it. It wouldn't necessarily be the public out there if things kind of over the next 30 days or so kind of settle down there. A lot of things are going to snap right back in place, because that's just something we like. I think you and I agree on too. Like the longevity of this is where there's damage or not. If this is something that isn't long, and by the way, like the end of summer isn't long in the grand scheme of things. If you're talking about real damage to the economy, real things that put things, and you hit it on the head before, like these things in other countries would put businesses out of business. Here, they'll have to tighten their belts a little bit, right? And small businesses go out of business every day. So, I mean, people can argue that, but a lot of businesses out there, it's not a question of them shutting down in the next 3 or 4 months in this country. So I think we need to stay strong on that.
Yeah, to your point of what does this look like long term? Oil is traded on futures, so people are making making investments based on the price of oil in the future. And right now, like the going into 2027, it's like $75 a barrel.
Right.
So that's pricing in. This is going to end and it's going to come down, but right this second, it's a problem. There's not enough. Demand has not shrunk. Supply is shrunk, prices high. But looking out into 9 months from now, they're saying, we're going to be higher than we were coming into the year, but far lower than we are today. And so that's, keeping an eye on that is like, all right, how long is this going to last? We definitely think, so a couple different ways this goes. Like, one is just it's prolonged, and 9 months from now, we're still fighting over the straits and we haven't controlled it. I don't think we'll be there, because at some point we do have the strength, military strength, to just handle the problem. And at some point, if we haven't disengaged, we might escalate, right? And they're escalating too. They are on their side, they view escalating against oil infrastructure, energy infrastructure in the Gulf states as their way to force, our hand, Gulf states' hand, to end it. But that's kind of like the worst case. Then you get into the best cases, one side or the other capitulates and just it's open next week. That's feasible. And then the other, somewhere in between is there's a, an easing. There is flow. It's 10 million barrels instead of 20 million barrels. So we're not quite back to normal, but maybe some of the other shock absorbers that we, used, the pipelines, the, ramp up production elsewhere, ease sanctions on Russia, like other things have kind of filled a gap. So we're not back to where we were, but we're way better than missing 20 million barrels a day. That's kind of like the middle of the road case. So I don't think we're going in the direction of it's just status quo. Things are just going the way they are today, 9 months from now, because I think we would be incentivized to escalate further and gain control.
Yeah, different leaders for different times, makes sense. And that doesn't mean that this couldn't still go either way. On one hand, we got a guy in the office who has no problem just declaring victory, right? Like, egotistically, he'll just be like, yep, I won, next, which could be good. Also could be bad, as you said, that we never took ground and people reestablish. We'll hold out hope. I hope we're not, hope we're not talking too much about this on the next one. I hope we're doing some cleanup stuff on this. That might be very optimistic, but at the same time, look, you and I have a different opinion on this, given our backgrounds, and yours more recent and still connected to it. And you're even teaching classes on this stuff today, but I don't think it's opinion. I think it's fact that people need to know. Like, we have devastated Iran, right? Like, at this point, their entire fight is to be a nuisance, not to be. They're not a worthy adversary on just like, let's duke this out. They are at the point right now where, in fact, my opinion would be they're as strong as they're going to be, because tomorrow they'll be a little weaker and tomorrow they'll be a little weaker. I don't think there's any reconstitution efforts here. And even when people talk about, the Russians giving them intel, and I've seen things where they're like, the Russians are giving them drones. No, the Russians have their own war right now, and they're also debilitated. That's why we don't see a lot of reaction out of the U.S. government going, like, I know the news is saying, well, they're just, Trump's afraid of Putin. I think, like, logical people would say, Russia's not in a position to help anybody right now. Their own military is depleted. This military is depleted. And so it doesn't mean that there can't be disruption. It doesn't mean that there can't be loss of American lives, but it is, they're not an adversary. They are not somebody that can stand across from us and go, let's duke this out, even on a small level. And I am optimistic that their capabilities, from everything that I'm seeing, are getting lesser and lesser every day, because every time they're getting low on launchers, and every time they launch something, we take it out right afterwards. From what I'm seeing, it's not like they're launching something and then they're going to launch 10 more things from there. It's like everything they have left, it's kind of like it's a one shot, right? They come up, they launch it, we destroy it, on to the next one, I think.
Yeah, that's their problem, is that they've got a lot of missiles underground, but not so many launchers anymore. And we're definitely hunting them actively. And so their ability to project power is, like you said, it's decreasing. Their ability to, so we both have escalation options. We have a lot of escalation options, right? Like, I mean, from just more strikes to specific targeted ground forces, right? Karg Island is where most of their oil flows out of the country. You might see the Marines just take it and own it. However, and we could, there might be somebody gets sent in to secure this facility underground or whatever. Like those are really, really hard missions, but within the capability of the U.S. military. So we have a lot of room to escalate. Their escalation looks like we're going to shoot more at energy targets, desalination targets in the Middle East, and other things that are disproportionately disruptive. Right? Again, this is they aren't in a position to cause a ton of loss of life or really militarily achieve any objectives other than you hit a desalination plant in Kuwait. It's a big problem for that country and does not come back online easily, right? So that's the kind of thing that they're going to potentially hit what they can hit, and we're going to do what we can do. And it's about like getting them to right. This is a fanatical regime that's left. How do you get them to say, we've had enough? What does that look like? Right. Yeah. How do you get them their will to keep fighting and doing these economically disruptive attacks? How do you get that will to break before our desire to just say, forget it? Like you're strategically disarmed. You're not projecting power. We're done with this. Like I'm going to stop punching you now.
Yeah. So I will close by saying for our clients, like we're still not in a position we're making huge wholesale changes right now. We're always looking at our clients that if they're in retirement or close to retirement, we've already got them set up in a way that, again, we have these buckets and, the near-term money is incredibly safe. And we're not seeing anything that's real precipitous right now. Like Matt and I, as you know, and Matt leading investments, he's not coming back and saying like, geez, I'm worried that we're just going to go off a cliff here in the next 30 days. And I think that's important for people to know. So we're keeping an eye on it. And right now, the truth is everything seems fairly resilient. Like even when people see the market go down, I mean, it's been cooking for so long. Something was going to make it go down about this time anyways, right? So I'm actually surprised that it hasn't been more of a catalyst for something bigger. And it really just shows kind of the resilience. So with that, hopefully we'll see you again next week and in the future. Click to subscribe, send any questions you have to the email on the screen. And we look forward to speaking again in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Matt.
All right, take care.